Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Supporters of Grace Life Church were out in full force this weekend at the church and again earlier today at the Alberta Legislature. Lethbridge Police Chief Shahimi Zadeh has completed his action plan to submit to the province addressing ongoing issues at the LPS. And we hear about an Alberta-made solution when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Hundreds of supporters of Grace Life Church formed a convoy from Calgary to Red Deer, then on to Grace Life Church in Spruce Grove, Alberta on Sunday to protest Alberta Health Services shutting down the church. Now, those who attended prayed, sang songs of worship, and waved Canadian flags. Grace Life Church was shut down by Alberta Health Services for not adhering to public health restrictions during the pandemic. The locks were changed on the building and fences were erected to keep people out. Now, at one point during the protest, some people began tearing down the fences and tossing them to the ground. Some who were there said that those who were ripping down the fences were not part of the original group or rally. In fact, here's what many were chanting as they saw the fences coming down.
Leave the fence alone! Leave the fence alone! Leave the fence alone! Leave the fence alone! Leave the fence alone!
Now, organizers helped the RCMP put some of the same fences back up later in the afternoon. John Carpe is representing Grace Life Church and its senior pastor, James Coates, for violating the Public Health Act, holding full church services more than a year after the government restrictions. John, did Grace Life organize this protest or rally at the church?
No, Grace Life Church proceeded to have a church service on Sunday morning at a confidential location, and Grace Life Church had no involvement with any of the rallies or demonstrations or events of what transpired on Sunday, April the 11th. Certainly the church feels encouraged by the fact that more and more people are speaking out in favor of religious freedom and the other charter freedoms. But the church had no involvement with the protests, demonstrations, activities taking place on Sunday, April 11th.
John, RCMP called in reinforcements during the rally at Grace Life Church. At this point, do we know if any tickets were issued for people not wearing masks or if anyone was arrested for causing a disturbance?
I'm not the expert or the authority on what happened on Sunday, but to the best of my knowledge, there were no tickets issued or arrests made.
So regardless of what side of the fence you're on, Albertans are feeling really frustrated by these government restrictions, and Sunday's protest was a prime example, wasn't it?
Well, you've got a government that is taking very harsh, very severe, very draconian enforcement measures against one particular church for not complying fully with the health orders. And then at the same time, when these health orders are being put before the court to get judged as to whether they are a justified violation of our rights and freedoms, you've got the government in court saying, oh, we want to delay the trial, even as we enter our 13th month of lockdowns. We just need more time to gather up the medical and scientific evidence to justify the lockdowns. I mean, that's just outrageous to engage in very ruthless, aggressive enforcement of health orders, and then at the very same time say, oh, we don't want these health orders to be challenged in court. We want to delay for months having the constitutionality of these health orders be determined by court. That's just galling. That's outrageous.
That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, joining me from Calgary. By the way, the trial for Grace Life Senior Pastor James Coates for breaking public health restrictions begins on May 3rd with Mr. Carpe in the Justice Center representing him. Now, the same group of people who attended the rally at Grace Life Church on Sunday took their message to the steps of the legislature in Edmonton today. Many are concerned that their rights and freedoms are being taken away with these public health restrictions. That includes the right to freely worship at a church at full capacity. Now, our poll question this week is, do you agree with the Alberta government's decision to go back to stage one or step one of the restrictions? That includes no more dining in at restaurants and no more drop-ins at your local gym. Log on to bridgecitynews.ca and let us know your thoughts. We'll tabulate the results and have them for you on Friday's show. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Montreal on Sunday in defiance of a newly adjusted nightly curfew intended to stem COVID-19 numbers there. Many were angered by the new measures and started fires and damaged property in the city's Old Montreal district. Police responded with tear gas and said that 7 arrests were made. There were also 107 tickets issued for public health violations. The Lethbridge Police Service say they've completed their action plan for Alberta's Justice Minister ahead of the April 16th deadline. Late last month, Minister Casey Madu gave the LPS a deadline of mid-April to present him with an action plan to address various issues at the LPS, or he would consider dissolving the Lethbridge Police Service altogether. Jeanette Rocher has an update for us. Jeanette?
Hal, according to Lethbridge Police Commission Chair Rob Van Spronsen, that action plan was completed last week and went back and forth for various revisions between the Commission, LPS, and the Mayor before being presented for final review before the Commission last Thursday during their meeting in which they voted upon it and passed it. Now, Van Spronsen says the action plan identifies 5 key areas, including recruitment, training, oversight, discipline, and transparency. I spoke with the Police Commission Chair today, and he had this to say.
We've tried to address all those different areas that he has asked for. And for me, the important thing I'd like people to know is that we haven't just all of a sudden now realized there's some problems with the LPS. We've known this since 2018. These are the things that happened in 2018, and since then we've been working hard to make changes to the service. And the force that we see today, the service that we see today in 2021, is quite different than the one that was in 2018. So we've been moving forward. We think because the concerns that the minister talked about, yes, they're there, and we need to address those concerns, and we think we have been over the last couple of years.
Now, Van Spronsen did express to Bridge City News that action plan will be emailed to the Justice Minister this week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, and he expects follow-up from Casey Madu on that plan later this week. Hal?
Thanks so much, Jeanette. A search and rescue team was called in after Coaldale RCMP received a call about a missing 5-year-old boy south of Picture Butte over the weekend. The incident occurred around 2 p.m. on Saturday when the boy, who was camping with his family in an area along the Old Man River south of Picture Butte, disappeared. The police, along with Search and Rescue, RCMP Air Services, Police Dog Services, and the Picture Butte Department joined forces to locate the boy. Now, fortunately, later that evening around 10 p.m., the boy was located safely. He was taken to hospital as a precaution due to his lengthy exposure of being outdoors. Lethbridge School Division is very vocal about their distaste for the provincial government's kindergarten to grade 6 curriculum pilot draft. The board says the government failed to reflect diversity, is not age appropriate, and even includes items that have been plagiarized. Board Chair Christine Light is urging the UCP government to scrap the entire draft and create a new one.
We need to ensure that they have a curriculum that sets them up for success, that sets them up to be inclusive, that sets them up to be innovative thinkers, that sets them up to be problem solvers. And that is what we need in a 21st century education system. That is what our society needs. And so we are calling on the province to stop this process, take the curriculum back, and start again. Because there are too many flaws within this curriculum to validate in a pilot process and make minor tweaks. It's beyond minor tweaks. It just needs a complete overhaul. It doesn't line up with our values. It doesn't line up with the needs of our students. It doesn't line up with the needs of students to take Alberta into 21st century learning and make it the strong province that it needs to be. And so we do call the government to take this back, listen to the feedback, and start it all over again.
Very soon, the Lethbridge School Division, alongside the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division, will have the opportunity to rapidly test for COVID-19. The province announced over the weekend that testing will be offered to 222,000 students across the province. Testing for junior and senior high school students will be prioritized based on various factors, including prevalence of the virus in the community. Lethbridge School Division Superintendent Cheryl Gilmore says that in addition to rapid testing, she's hoping staff members will be vaccinated soon as well.
As the vaccination progresses, though, and as I see that we're starting to move beyond the most vulnerable, I think that giving schools consideration, school staff consideration only makes sense because really, in terms of continuity of learning to students, the more teachers end up in quarantine and isolation because of positive cases in their classes, and the more at risk we put them, really we're affecting continuity of learning as well as families of students who end up having to support that learning when things turn around.
Over 400 schools in the province have reported cases of COVID-19. Alberta Health Services released its COVID-19 numbers on Monday, and there were 1,136 new cases, along with 5 new deaths. There are currently 7,620 active variant cases, accounting for more than half of the cases. Here in the South Zone, there are 949 active cases, including 506 in Lethbridge and 94 in Medicine Hat. The city of Calgary now has almost 5,500 cases, while in Edmonton, they have 2,414 active novel coronavirus cases. Fortunately, more than 145,000 Albertans have also recovered from COVID-19. It seems as though for many in our province, they're not receiving the COVID-19 vaccine fast enough. Andrew McIsaac is the CEO of Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation in Edmonton, and he says his group is able to supply thousands of vaccines now, but with upgrades to their facility, they could potentially supply millions more next year.
The big issue for us here is a pandemic comes along and everyone invests in something, but then if you don't have a usage for it afterwards, it gets mothballed. Whereas what we're proposing is something that will provide immediate relief for the pandemic, but also has a very long-term usage. So, down the road, if, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, there's another pandemic. We've got that capacity and it's current and it's operating, and we can quickly pivot it to address concerns.
Catch the full interview with Mr. McIsaac and Jeanette Rocher discussing vaccines and their availability coming up later in our program. The Alberta government announced today that over 865,000 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have now been administered into the arms of Albertans. Premier Jason Kenney says more doses means catching up to the variant spread, which means we get our freedoms back.
Every day, tens of thousands more people gain immunity to the virus through the vaccine rollout. In the coming weeks, we'll be able to say that almost a quarter of Albertans have some degree of immunity either through the vaccines or from prior infection. By the end of May, it's expected to be almost half with that level of protection. And by the end of June, we anticipate that about 2/3, and by mid-September, almost 3/4 of Albertans will have protective immunity.
Premier Jason Kenney says he's confident that the Calgary Stampede will be able to go ahead this July if the province can get through the next few weeks and defeat the current COVID-19 spike. Kenney says the province anticipates Alberta can achieve close to 70% immunity either through vaccinations or through natural infections by the end of June. He says if people stop socializing in groups and follow public health guidelines, the vaccines will catch up to the COVID-19 variants of concern a lot more quickly. The head of the Alberta Medical Association says a lack of trust was a key reason a recent labour deal with the province was rejected. Dr. Paul Boucher says before he and Health Minister Tyler Shandro can begin negotiating a new deal, trust must be restored. He says he and Minister Shandro will meet again almost 2 weeks after physicians of the AMA refused to ratify the tentative deal brokered by both sides. The deal was reached more than a year after Shandro tore up the last contract and imposed new fees and rules on doctors. Families of victims of impaired driving can now have a chance to have their family members' names immortalized in a special monument. Mothers Against Drunk Driving is erecting a monument to remember the victims. The Victim Services Manager for the Western Region, Gillian Phillips, says that the reaction from families of the victims shows that the small act of kindness can go a long way.
We do many different memorials, but these monuments are so important because that name is there forever. It's memorialized forever. We make it into a beautiful little sanctuary place where people can go. So families can go at any time of the day and year, go visit, sit down, and their loved one's name remains. And so I know how important it is for families to have that recognition, and just it would be there for years to come.
The deadline for the submission of names is August the 26th. An ad agency in Lethbridge is raising awareness and funds for autism through the use of a quilt fundraiser. Businesses in our city and southern Alberta joined forces to bring logos and designs to make the quilt. Micah Quinn has the story.
There are 65 southern Alberta businesses that donated their hoodies and shirts to make this king-sized quilt, and the proceeds will go to the Chinook Autism Society.
They're almost missed in society. I think the educational end of it or the awareness value of it is missed. So we chose to work with Chinook Autism Society. It was amazing how many the outpour of shirts and people reaching out to us from businesses. This year we have a California king-size quilt because we ended up with 65 companies from southern Alberta, different companies wanting their logo and shirt on our quilt. But that's not even the end of it. We ended up with a surplus of 40 extra companies that didn't make this quilt. So we will be redoing this in a few months, probably 5-6 months at the end of the summer.
The quilt was made by Marshall Fabrics in Lethbridge, and it took 27.5 hours to make.
It is a real quality piece of fabric. It's like when I saw the handiwork that was done on it, I was absolutely amazed. And to do it in 27.5 hours, that's something else.
The opening bid for the quilt is $500, but the group is hoping that people open their wallets even more for such a good cause.
And we are hoping to come out with this with $2,500 or $3,000, or blow us out of the water with a larger amount.
Gervais says that the auction will take place later in the week, and the group will be announcing even more information on social media in the coming days. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Kevin Olson has been practicing Taekwondo for 35 years. The Edmonton man says martial artists from around the world have been devastated they cannot train due to the pandemic. Now that's why he's organized a demonstration called Break for a Breakthrough. More than 100 martial artists, including those from Poland, India, and Malaysia, broke aboard to re-energize and snap out of their pandemic fatigue.
I'm hosting, to the best of my knowledge, the first online international live board-breaking demonstration called Break for Breakthrough. I designed this event to gather martial artists from around the world to inspire people to make a breakthrough in their own life. Now, so board breaking is a test of skill, mental and physical skill. It's a test of speed and accuracy and commitment, because it puts the person under pressure. You're out of your comfort zone, and that is a beautiful place because that's how we grow. So the pandemic has had a massive negative effect on martial arts training across the board. Every single martial arts school around the world has lost students.
A spring snowstorm caused some major highway crashes and power outages in southern Manitoba. Mounties say they responded to a number of collisions along Highway West of Winnipeg on Monday. Manitoba Hydro says there were also outages affecting around 5,000 customers in Portage La Prairie and Steinbach. It says power has been restored for most people and all repairs should be finished by later today. Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says he will vote against a bill brought forward by a member of his own caucus that aims to ban sex-selective abortions. O'Toole did not answer whether he would instruct his opposition critics to vote against the private member's bill from Saskatchewan MP Kathy Wagenthal.
As you know, I'm pro-choice, and I will be voting against this private member's bill. I will always, as Prime Minister, defend the rights, the human rights of all Canadians, including women, to make this decision for themselves. I've been crystal clear on that and will be as Prime Minister. Yes, being pro-choice means I will defend that right, and there will be no law passed that will restrict the rights of Canadians. As I've said, I'm a pro-choice member of Parliament, was elected leader of the Conservatives in that fashion. I will always defend the rights of all Canadians and focus on their prosperity. That is my relentless focus. There is freedom of speech of all members of Parliament, including with private motions and bills.
Tory MP James Bazan questioned Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan about why the Liberals shut down a committee looking into allegations of sexual misconduct in the military.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals on the Defense Committee just shut down the investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against General Vance. These Liberals are preventing key witnesses from appearing before committee and are covering up what the Defense Minister knew about these serious allegations 3 years ago. The self-proclaimed feminist Liberal government wants to bury the truth rather than stand up for the brave women who service in uniform. Why did the Liberal government shut down the Defense Committee investigation that is trying to protect women in the military? What are they trying to hide?
Mr. Speaker, I will always respect the work done by colleagues at the committee. In fact, I worked at with the National Defence Committee on this matter quite extensively. I appeared at the committee 3 times, Mr. Speaker, and also more than 6 hours. I repeatedly stated that each of these appearances and many times in the House of Commons that our government and me personally will not stand for any form of sexual misconduct, and that we will take strong action on this. And I look forward to the recommendations of the committee when it comes out. Thank you.
Christians in the UK are claiming victory for freedom of speech after a court ruled in their favor. It all stems from a Twitter pile-on pressuring a Christian festival into removing posters of Franklin Graham because of his religious beliefs on traditional marriage. We have more now on this report.
A UK court has ruled that the 2018 Lancashire Festival of Hope in the north of England with evangelist Franklin Graham was discriminated against when their bus ads that simply read Time for Hope were removed. Blackpool Borough Council and Blackpool Transport Services Limited took down the ads, citing that members of the community complained about Graham's association with the festival. However, the court concluded that the ads were inoffensive and the transportation company had actually violated the UK's Equality Act. Reverend Steve Haskett testified on behalf of the festival during the trial.
It's a victory really for Christians across the UK who are concerned about the erosion of our ability to say what we believe to be true without some kind of uproar taking place. But really, and much more fundamentally, it's a victory for anybody who's interested in freedom of speech, because this is an area where Christians and Muslims and Jews and humanists and atheists, people of every religious persuasion would agree that, you know, it is important, whatever our convictions are, that we are free to be able to share them.
So it's hoped this victory for religious freedom will help inspire the UK Church to freely share the hope they have in Christ during these uncertain times. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
It was a cool and windy spring-like day in the city, and those below seasonal values will be sticking around for some time. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. We had a much cooler start to the work week with a temperature barely above the freezing mark for much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, those below seasonal temperatures will be sticking around for a few days, and we may even see a little moisture as well.
Yeah, that is true. We could actually see a 30% chance of flurries this evening with an overnight low of -4. Into tomorrow, Tuesday, though, a nice northeast wind at 20 kilometers per hour. Not too bad. Mix of sun and cloud. High of 3 degrees, so still under that seasonal average, like you were saying. Into Wednesday, up to 7 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. 12 degrees on Thursday, which is our seasonal average. Up to 16 on Friday with lots of sunshine. And then get out your sunscreen for Saturday. It's going to be a high of 21 degrees. Not quite high enough to break any records yet for that day. And then on Sunday, we dip down to 11 degrees with a 30% chance of rain. So it is April, springtime. That means we're having that roller coaster effect with the weather and with the temperatures. Here's our average high for this time of year, 12 degrees, -2. The average low, 24 was our high temperature back in 2004. And in 1968, we had our chilliest, which was -14. 6:45 is when the sun rose this morning, and 8:19 is when we will see our sunset this evening. So let's take a look at what's happening in the rest of the country with the highs for tomorrow over on the West Coast. 17 in Victoria, lots of sunshine. Going to be a little bit cooler by the water though. 14 in Vancouver with lots of sunshine. Also feeling a bit windy by the water there. 9 degrees in Edmonton and 5 in Calgary. Calgary experiencing possible flurries overnight tonight as well. Same thing as Lethbridge. And into tomorrow, that should be clearing up. 2 degrees, the high for Saskatoon tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Regina experiencing some snow overnight and into tomorrow, -3 the high. Snow and blowing snow for Winnipeg, high of -2. They could see up to 5 centimeters of the white stuff. Over in Toronto, drizzle and fog tomorrow, 14 the high, 19 the high for Ottawa with mainly overcast skies. Beautiful sunny day in Montreal tomorrow with a high of 17. Lots of precipitation on the east coast tomorrow in Atlantic Canada. Chance of showers in Fredericton, high of 7. Same thing there for Halifax. Charlottetown could be a possibility of mixed flurries with the showers, high of 5 degrees. Rainfall warning is in effect for St. John's, Newfoundland, high of 4 degrees. They could get 15 to 20 or higher millimeters of rain tomorrow. Fog, also 80 kilometer per hour winds. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
The Bank of Canada's latest survey of consumer expectation shows Canadians expect their spending patterns to return to normal this year. It says the gap between household spending and earnings is at an all-time high, with people planning to spend savings they built up during the pandemic. Many Canadians plan to spend more than a third of their savings from the pandemic over the next 2 years and use more than a tenth of that to pay down debt. Sobeys is bringing back bonus pay for workers at all of its stores under new stay-at-home orders in Ontario aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19. Canada's second largest grocery retailer says the temporary program is aimed at rewarding employees for the amount of time they work during the lockdown periods. Employees will earn an extra $10 to $100 more each week depending on how much they work. The bonus is to remain in place until the end of the mandated lockdowns or until determined by what the company describes as ever-changing circumstances. This is tax season. Now, many Canadians are either doing their taxes themselves or hiring an accountant to do the legwork for them. Jaden Evanson is a chartered professional accountant at Volution LLP here in Lethbridge, and he says the advantage of hiring a professional is that they can help you go back 10 years or more to fix old tax returns and help you get an even bigger refund.
That was instituted a few years ago under the fairness provision. So we have up to 10 years that we can look back. And I've done that before. I had a client, we looked back at the full 10 years and realized that there were some mistakes made with their donations. And we got them a refund of over $18,000 because they had missed a number of credits. So it is worth taking a look. And if you're not sure, it is actually something that you can go and talk to an accountant about and get them to review it for you for a lower fee than it might cost to just have them file your tax.
Jaden will also discuss how much you can claim if you're working from home during the pandemic. That Q&A is coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 26 points on the day to finish at 19,201. The Dow was down 55 points to 33,745. The S&P 500 was down almost a point to 4128, and the Nasdaq was down 50 points on the day to 13,850. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 32 cents to 59.64 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to 2.55 US. Gold was down a cent to 17.3275 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 24.82 US an ounce. Wheat is at $315 per metric ton, barley's at $325, canola's at $804, and corn is at $351 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 70 cents to 122.73. Feeder cattle were down 25 cents to 144.50, and lean hogs were up 5 cents to 103.53. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.62 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Lethbridge Police Service says they've completed their action plan for Alberta's Justice Minister ahead of the April 16th deadline. Late last month, Minister Casey Medew gave the LPS a deadline of mid-April to present him with an action plan to address the various issues at the LPS, or he would consider dissolving the Lethbridge Police Service altogether. There's an Alberta pharmaceutical company which is offering a homemade solution when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines. Jeanette Rocher will have details coming up shortly in an interview with Andrew McIsaac from Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation in Edmonton.
As the battle against COVID-19 continues in Canada, there has been much frustration from physicians and provincial governments as to the lack of a consistent and adequate supply of COVID vaccines. Canada seems to be dependent on receiving vaccines from other nations, but an Alberta company plans to change that. Joining me today from Edmonton is Andrew McIsaac. He's the CEO of Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation, or API. Andrew, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, Andrew, can you first of all tell us a little bit about API? This is a not-for-profit organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So API is a not-for-profit institute that's focused on the commercial development of discoveries in the life sciences, predominantly pharmaceuticals and drugs. And what we do is we provide the sort of boots on the ground technical capability for folks who come up with a new discovery to turn that discovery into something that is a reality, something that we can take that saves lives, be it an anti-cancer medicine or a vaccine.
Okay, now many Canadians would agree that we need to stop relying on China and other countries to supply our medical needs because it just doesn't make sense. So I understand that the government of Alberta recently announced that they're wanting investors to come forward with proposals to develop and manufacture COVID vaccines in Alberta. So is the government putting tax dollars into this as well? Because your company is involved in this, right?
Yeah, so we're very, very happy about the focus of the government on looking at this issue very seriously, in investing to ensure that we're able to have a secure supply. The proposal process closed a few weeks ago, and right now there is the ongoing sort of due diligence on proposals that have gone forward. And we're hoping, we're working with a lot of the vaccine manufacturers here in the province to hopefully establish capacity. So, from our standpoint, I do think that the government really needs to invest in the infrastructure for us to be able to manufacture here. And that's really what's happened in other jurisdictions that have been successful in manufacturing their own vaccines. There has been governments at the table providing that catalyst. For us, if we get our facility up and running, we'll be able to do the fill finish for vaccines from established pharma as well as local companies like Entos and Providence Therapeutics. So there's a real critical need here, and it sounds like there's some attention being given.
Okay, now are these Alberta-based companies? Do we have Alberta-based companies that have a vaccine at the center stage of development waiting for approval from Health Canada?
So we have two main companies within the province that are focused on vaccines for COVID-19. There's Providence Therapeutics in Calgary and Entos Pharmaceuticals here in Edmonton. And both of them are in phase 1 of clinical trials. So they're doing the safety testing of their products, and the pathway to having a drug on the market will likely take another year for some of these. But with COVID-19, it's very key that we focus on looking to the future, because if you start talking to us about a year ago, many people were saying, oh yeah, things will be all settled by now, but here we are going into another third wave. So I think it's key that we invest now so that we aren't stuck with more shutdowns and lockdowns and restrictions.
Yeah, exactly. It's just getting to be a little much, isn't it? So you would like to have a manufacturer of COVID vaccines here in Alberta. Now, do you have a building or a production facility for this? Is it already finished? Does it have a ways to go yet?
So API manufacturers, prior to the pandemic, we manufacture for clinical trials. So companies that have a novel drug, we produce them for the clinical trial stage. And what we're looking to do is expand out our capacity so that we can produce for the market stage. So rather than us producing thousands of doses of a drug, we want to be able to produce millions, and we want to be able to produce them relatively quickly. And so our goal is, if we get this capacity up and running, we can either manufacture vaccines produced by some of the current large pharma companies, as well as vaccines produced by our local pharmaceutical companies. So we've sort of hedged our bets from that aspect by having that neutral capacity that enables in-province production. So that's sort of what we focused on from that standpoint. If we get funded, it'll still be months until we're fully up and running. But there's going to be a need, especially as new variants come online, that we should have this capacity here, because we don't want to be in a situation where a variant comes out and there needs to be a new vaccine and we don't have the ability here. We'll be in the exact same boat we were in March of last year.
Yeah, totally. Now, you'd mentioned months and you'd also mentioned a year possibly for a vaccine to be developed. But how long do you actually estimate to have everything in place? Health Canada approved, the vaccine, staff hired, everything up and running, still a year or more away?
Yeah, so for us, we're actually quite ahead of the pack in that we already have a Health Canada drug establishment license, because we do produce drugs for trials, and it was relatively easy for us to get that additional approval. For our facility, we'd have to add in additional staff and components, but that's something that we're quite used to doing because we are a company that helps life science companies grow and scale their operations. So from that aspect, we're well covered. In terms of when the facility will be pumping out vaccines, we'd probably be looking at early 2022. And that's probably the fastest you can get anything done. Anyone who says that they can do something like that sooner is, to be honest, not looking at the real or understanding the real challenges involved in vaccine manufacturing, because you really need to ensure that you've put this facility up in a way that is completely safe and compliant, and will ensure that the supply is exactly what we need. If it takes 6 months to build a house, think about how long it takes to build a vaccine manufacturing plant.
Now, Andrew, once everything is up and running, how many vaccines could you possibly produce? Would this be enough for Alberta or for the whole country, or for even like other nations around the world? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so for us, we don't really see that there's a strong sort of economic standpoint to produce, at the world stage. What we really think that there's a sweet spot that Alberta sits in, which is producing for the local market as well as for the early stage of new drugs. And what we would do is we'd have a facility that can produce about 4 million doses a month of vaccines. So, in a crunch where all of a sudden you need sudden capacity, within a couple of months, we'd be able to cover the whole province. And then that additional capacity can be used for both supporting, generic drugs that are in shortages with AHS, as well as broader Canadian market access. And as these companies that are using our facility grow, they're then able to invest in that larger scale infrastructure to talk about the global market.
Yeah. Now, I'm just curious, by early 2022, won't everybody have already supposedly been vaccinated already for COVID-19? So who do you think this is going to reach? And do you think other variants will appear by then and making your vaccine obsolete, or is it going to cover? I mean, some variants might not even be in existence yet, yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
this is the problem, is we don't really know. One thing we do know is it's very likely that we'll continue to need annual or biannual booster shots for COVID-19 vaccine. So that will be a big challenge. The new variants coming out will continue to be a challenge. There's also the broader need within the healthcare system for security of supply of some critical medicines. About 20% of pharmacists' time here is used chasing down drug shortages. And we see it even in terms of when COVID-19 hit and some drugs were switched to a 30-day supply because of concerns of shortages. If we have the ability to manufacture some of these in province, it'll alleviate those concerns. We've been able to stay away from having a large impact from those, but those have been issues that have dogged our healthcare system for the past 15, 20 years. And so this will also be able to provide a solution for those as well.
Yeah. So is the infrastructure in the COVID vaccine, could it be used to manufacture other pharmaceuticals?
Yes, absolutely. So it's tailored as a flexible site that could do everything from the drugs that you need to be put under for surgery, to anti-epileptic drugs, to vaccines, and stuff that's coming out of our universities. So the work of Michael Houghton, the Nobel laureate, the work of researchers at the University of Calgary and Lethbridge, would all be able to manufacture their potential drugs here, and it would provide a relatively large leg up for innovators within Alberta and within Canada to be able to move through clinical trials. So that would be a huge benefit from the facility, which we really see as the primary sort of longer term piece, because the big issue for us here is a pandemic comes along and everyone invests in something, but then if you don't have a usage for it afterwards, it gets mothballed. Whereas what we're proposing is something that will provide immediate relief for the pandemic, but also has a very long-term usage. So, down the road, if, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, there's another pandemic. We've got that capacity and it's current and it's operating, and we can quickly pivot it to address concerns.
So, Andrew, if a bright entrepreneur or medical student or doctor has a great idea on how to solve a health problem, can they contact API for help in developing their idea?
Absolutely. So API is focused on building the life sciences sector here within the province. We actually do projects across Alberta. We have researchers we work with at the University of Lethbridge, the University of Calgary, and the University of Alberta. And we're always looking to support them as they undertake their commercialization. I'd welcome anyone who's interested in moving forward with an idea or discovery they have within their scientific lab to reach out to us, because that's really what our role is to enable them to take that idea and move it forward in a way that that you typically find within the pharmaceutical industry.
Now, and they can reach out through your website?
Yes, so www.appliedpharma.ca.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, it looks like we are about out of time, but we look so forward to hearing more about this as things develop. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tax season is here, and if you're like most of us, you have more questions than answers. Joining me now to answer some of those questions is Jaden Evanson, a Lethbridge Chartered Professional Accountant and a partner with Volution LLP. Welcome to Bridge City News, Jaden.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, many people today just use tax software to file their income tax returns. I've been guilty of that myself. I've been doing it for about 20 years. But often it can be worth hiring a tax professional to do the preparation for you. Why is that? Maybe we'll save a little more money?
Sometimes it can be money, right? There's a lot of credits to be aware of. And the fact of the matter is that the government introduces new things every single year. We've seen that a lot this year, especially with COVID. I think the main reason that it's really nice to have a CPA on your team is just peace of mind. That you don't have to worry about it. There's no stress. You know it's taken care of. You know that you've got a professional on your side. I think that's the biggest benefit that we offer for personal taxes.
And how about when personal income tax needs to be filed? When is that again? What's the date?
So April 30th is the date that everybody knows about. Everybody's very familiar with that. Now, there is a catch. If you are a sole proprietor running your own business, you have until June 15th. Now, the catch is you have until then to file, but if you owe taxes, your payment deadline is still April 30th. And if you don't pay by that date, the government will begin charging interest on that date.
Ouch. Now, with so many people working from home, Jade, in the past year due to COVID-19 restrictions, the lockdowns, what can people claim as work from home expenses? I'm guessing maybe some utilities, some of your rent or your mortgage?
Yeah, so it used to be if you're an employee working from home, home office claims were really, really restricted. With COVID, the government's really opened that up. The simplest one right now is what they call a simplified working from home. It's a temporary flat method where you record the number of days you worked from home in 2020 due to COVID, up to a maximum of 200 working days, and you get a $2 per day credit. Very simple, doesn't require any special form, any special math, nothing. It's a per day credit. Now you can take that a step further. You'll need a form from your employer, a T777S or a T2200. If you have one of those, you can do a bit of math. You can pull in your utilities, internet costs, a couple of little things. You get a percentage of your home office space, and then that can be your claim. Depends on which one to do. One's very easy, one's more complicated. Doesn't necessarily mean one's better than the other.
Now, I'm told there's a special benefit for those who earned $75,000 or less than $75K and collected a COVID-19 related benefit. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so if you have earned $75,000 or less in 2020 and you collected the CERB or the CRB or a different form of employment insurance because of COVID, what happens is the CRA is waiving all interest charges on any taxes you might owe until April 30th, 2022. The reason being is CERB didn't have any taxes withheld. So a lot of people who normally get refunds are having to pay taxes. The government's acknowledged that and said, okay, we'll give you a full year interest-free to pay that off.
Now, I think with the job losses that came along with COVID-19 and the pandemic, many people tried to start up a lot of their home-based businesses. We're seeing that more and more today, Jaden. What are some of the things that we need to be aware of that we can be claim as business expenses or write-offs outside of what we maybe already touched on?
So business expenses, it's pretty vague actually what you can claim. The general rule of thumb is if something helped you earn business income, then that's a business expense. Obvious ones are advertising, right? You're paying money to try to get new clients. Office expenses, if you have to print things off, it's an obvious one. But then you've got use of home, use of vehicle, use of your cell phone, use of your home internet. Anything that you did that helped you earn business income, there's a potential for a write-off there. However, you have to make sure that you're doing your research, make sure that you're being conservative. You can't say 90% of your internet use was for business. Don't forget, we all spend time on our phone at night just goofing off. We have to be aware of that it's being used for personal use as well. So we can only take a portion of those.
So when would it make sense for a small business owner, maybe somebody who's a sole proprietor, to maybe expand things and set up a corporation? Now, there's some costs associated with this, but also some advantages as well, correct?
Absolutely. Now, corporation versus sole proprietorship, that's a discussion that I could talk about for, oh gosh, easily an hour. Lots of things to consider about that. Now, a few rules of thumb. Corporations are great if you have a high risk business. If there's a high likelihood of being sued, of having to attend court, of having insurance claims, corporations are fantastic for that. Corporations are also really great when you are earning more money than you need to live off of personally. If you leave money inside of the corporation, there is a lower tax rate that will allow you to invest more back into your business. If you're a sole proprietor, you're paying full personal taxes on everything you earn, even if you want to invest it back into the business.
And I guess you can really protect yourself as well legally if you have a corporation as opposed to a sole proprietorship, because somebody could actually sue you as a sole proprietor, come after you in your house, where the corporation, I guess there's a little bit of a buffer there. The corporation's protecting you, correct?
Absolutely. And that buffer is a huge reason to set up that corporation. Now, doing that, you do want to make sure you're working with a lawyer and doing it right, because if that error is significant enough, you personally are still liable. You're not magically protected because you had a corporation, but it can definitely help in those situations.
Now, if somebody made a mistake when filing last year's tax return, or maybe they forgot to claim a benefit, can that be fixed somehow?
Absolutely. The government allows us to actually fix up to 10 years of prior tax returns.
Wow.
That was instituted a few years ago under the fairness provision. So we have up to 10 years that we can look back. And I've done that before. I had a client, we looked back at the full 10 years and realized that there were some mistakes made with their donations. And we got them a refund of over $18,000 because they had missed a number of credits. So it is worth taking a look. And if you're not sure, it is actually something that you can go and talk to an accountant about and get them to review it for you for a lower fee than it might cost to just have them file your taxes.
$18,000, wow, that would come in handy right now. Now, if a person normally receives money back from the government after filing taxes, whether it's $18,000 or not, is there a way to arrange things with your employer and the government so that they can maybe have less taxes deducted from your paycheck next year?
You know, that's a really good question. And the answer to that is it depends. And just as a quick aside, it depends is probably the most common answer I give to questions. Everything depends on so many factors. Employers are required by law to withhold a minimum amount of tax, and it's based on a few factors. If you've ever gotten a new job or got a job recently, perhaps you remember filling out a form called the TD1, where it lists all these personal credits. Now, some of the personal credits you can list on there are if you have a spouse that's not working, you can claim the spousal amount. That will help reduce the amount of taxes withheld. But if you make a lot of donations, you cannot put that on the TD1 form. Your employer cannot reduce the amount of taxes withheld.
Now let's talk about some of the charitable tax donations, whether giving to the church, giving to the Lord, giving to some nonprofits like the Canadian Cancer Society, the SPCA, Heart and Stroke Foundation. How beneficial is this to donate to nonprofits, and how much will it help me save on my taxes?
So donations actually in the Canadian tax system have a huge impact. The first $200 of donations have a small impact. Every dollar gets you 25 cents back in taxes, and that's in Alberta. Different provinces have different provincial rates. So if I throw out a percentage, I'm talking about Alberta. On the high end though, once you've surpassed $200, every dollar of donation is a 48-cent reduction in taxes, nearly half. So if you make a $1,000 donation, your taxes can be reduced by nearly $500.
Wow. Are there some potential tax implications when it comes to buying or selling a home?
Absolutely. There's a lot to be aware of. With the skyrocketing prices in BC and in Ontario, and with more and more house flippers, the government's introduced a new rule. Every time you sell your home, you need to fill out a form declaring that you sold it. You need to then declare the years that you lived in it and which ones of those you're going to choose to be your principal residence years. For most of us, one home is not a big deal. Anybody who has multiple homes, you can only choose each year one time. When you do that, then the gain on your property is tax-free, like we're used to. When you sell a home, there's no taxes. But if you have more than one property, it's something to be aware of. And even if you've only ever lived in one property, that form is mandatory. You need to make sure you fill it out.
So if you have a parent who passes away, you inherit the house, you're the executor and you're the sole heir, let's say, of a house. Now, that parent's home is their main residence. Do you have to pay capital gains on that home?
So what happens when somebody passes away is everything that they own is taxed on their final tax return as if they sold it. What that means is that it's as if the individual who was living there sold the home and then just repurchased it at the current value. So they get to claim their principal residence, no taxes. It is then goes through the will to the beneficiary of the will at the new value. So the beneficiary of the will gets the property at its market value today. It's one of the ways in the Canadian tax system we don't have an inheritance tax. On passing, there's tax. When you inherit something, you own it free and clear of tax, if your executor made sure the taxes were paid.
Okay. Now, any tax advice to landlords who maybe rent out their basement suite or rent out another home?
First one, make sure you're reporting your income. That's the biggest thing to be aware of. Always, always, always report the income. Even if it seems small, even if it doesn't feel like you made $1, report it. The second thing, mortgage payments, only the interest is deductible, not the entire payment. The third one is, unless you have a strong reason to do so, we do not usually recommend that you claim the capital cost allowance on that second home. The CCA, or capital cost allowance, is the depreciation of the home. We recommend not claiming it because if you do, it eliminates future tax planning possibilities with that property.
So how long should a person really hang on to their tax documents? I've heard up to, 10 years? Or do we need to hold on to them that long?
So the minimum that we recommend is 7 years. 3 years are always available to the government and to the courts to go and look at. If they look at those 3 years and have proof that you made a significant error, they can open up another 3 years. Then that 7th year is just to be safe. There have been some cases where they look back further than that, but we usually recommend at least 7 years. Now, the one exception to that is if you purchase property. If you purchase property and you still own it, hang on to those documents until 7 years after you have sold the property. Purchase documents you always want to hold on to.
Jaden, what advice would you give someone thinking about investing in an RSP or a TFSA?
That's another one of those really big questions, like that corporation versus sole proprietor. There's a lot of decision that goes into that. Our RSPs are fantastic tax planning tools and they're really useful, but they're not always the right choice. Our RSPs give us a credit based on our current tax rate. So if we have higher income, the RSP benefit is also higher. Conversely, if we have lower income, the RSP benefit is actually lower. And that's where a TFSA may be more valuable. It's a difficult decision to make on a quick whim. I would highly recommend talking to your financial advisor or to an accountant to get some advice on that because every situation is unique and one might be better for you than the other.
Now, Jaden, this year the CRA is including a Canadian Digital News Media Tax Credit. Can you explain what that is?
So the Canadian government has made a decision to help support news media. In that, what happens is if you subscribe to a digital subscription to a qualified Canadian journalistic organization, you can report on your tax return and get a tax credit up to 15% of what you pay. So if you pay $100 over the year for your news subscriptions, you get a $15 reduction in your taxes. You might be thinking, oh, it's only $15, but hey, it's $15 still in your pocket and not in the government's. The government has not been super clear on which organizations qualify. If you just do a quick Google search of the Canadian Digital Tax News Media Credit, you'll be able to see some of their guidelines as far as what they would like to see before you go ahead and claim that.
A lot of quality insight here. Jane Evanson is a Lethbridge Chartered Professional Accountant and a partner with Volution LLP. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Happy again to do it.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.